Hello, people. Another beautiful day. Yeah. What's up, Xbox nerds and Xbox Nation? Forza Horizon 5 is creeping. But anyway, we talking about Final Fantasy 14 here coming to Xbox. You know, the MMO Final Fantasy 14. Look, my attitude is like this. When it comes to Final Fantasy, to me, Final Fantasy is a publicity stunt game now. I call Final Fantasy a big publicity stunt. You know, if Final Fantasy 14 don't come to Xbox, so what? Big deal. Boo-hoo. I mean, there's other RPGs to play. You know, Final Fantasy is not the only RPG that's out there. It's not. There's plenty of RPGs to play. So if it comes, it comes. If it don't, it don't. You know, Microsoft can do without Final Fantasy. So it's not no big deal, man. To me, Final Fantasy is a big publicity stunt. And when they put that time exclusive on Final Fantasy VII, the remake, that's when I lost interest in the game. My attitude is like I could care less, man. To tell you the truth, you know, there's plenty of other RPGs out there to play. So Final Fantasy 14 is not the only RPG. That game should have been on Xbox One since day one. Since day one, ever since that game came out on the PlayStation 3. On the PlayStation 3, that game should have been out on Xbox One already. You know what I'm saying? And like I told you guys, Sony and Squaresoft got history together. Sony and Nintendo got history, but Sony and Square got history because Final Fantasy is what put PlayStation on the map. Without Final Fantasy, PlayStation would be nothing. To put it in a proper perspective, without Final Fantasy, man, PlayStation would be nothing. So Sony and Square got history since PlayStation 1, since Final Fantasy 7. So Final Fantasy 7, the MMO 14 should have been on Xbox One already. Okay, it should have been on Xbox One already. So all this talk about positive about Final Fantasy coming to Xbox, to me now Final Fantasy is a big publicity stunt. It's a publicity stunt game right now. When it comes to RPGs, because there's better RPGs than Final Fantasy out there. So to me Final Fantasy now is overrated. That's just my take. But anyway, seen this article on Eurogamer. Says here, Yoshida positive about Final Fantasy 14 coming to Xbox. We are still in discussion with Microsoft. Really? Okay. Final Fantasy 14 director Naoki Yoshida is positive about the possibility of the MMO coming to Xbox. Speaking in an interview with Easy Allies and reported by The Gamer, Yoshida was asked about whether the game will come to Microsoft console. Though he wasn't able to share any details, it seems the conversations are ongoing. I feel bad for saying the same thing. I feel bad for saying the same thing every time, but we are still in discussions with Microsoft, and I feel like our conversations are going in a positive tone. He says, I don't want to say we don't have an Xbox version, but I'm hoping that the timing will be very soon that I will have some kind of update to players. I'm sure there's a lot of things that people want to ask about on this subject, and there are a lot of things I would love to share, but I am afraid I am unable to divulge on those details. So when the timing comes, I'm sure the time will come. So if you'll kindly stand by, that'd be great. It's coming, subject that it's a timing issue more than anything else, and that what with Endwalker on the way, Square Enix probably has enough on its plate without porting an entire MMO to a new console. And he says Yoshida recently announced at a press event that Endwalker, that Final Fantasy 14 is now the most profitable game in the long-running series. and has now surpassed 24 million players. No doubt, adding an Xbox edition would add to those numbers. Final Fantasy XIV is due out on the 23rd of November across current platforms, PC and PlayStation consoles. And we got some comments here. What are people saying here? 14 comments. People, one person said, I think it's even more of a capacity problem. Servers already seems to be bulking under the current amount of players, with uncertain work being completely cut off from new players creation and encountering 20 to 40 person queues almost every time I want to log in. Neither SE or MS would want to give Sony nor Microsoft would want to give new players a bad experience when they open the game up to Xbox players. I'm a PlayStation player. I would love to get even more people into the game, but I rather prefer everyone get a great experience. And it says, another person said, it's both you and you're right. For people who haven't followed this game, they had an unexpected jump in new player recently, but weren't able to buy more servers due to the global chip shortage. They offered to pay more than the market value to ship the queues, but still weren't able to get some. And then another person says, okay, my little Series S could actually be a nice MMO box for Final Fantasy, Phantasy Star Online, Terra, Elder Scrolls Online, Black Desert on it. Can pretty much use it like a PC, keyboard and mouse attached, and the new Xbox Chromium Edge browser is performant enough that you can use web apps like Microsoft Office in it. LOL, decent mini PC. Another person says, don't forget emulation. Another person says, the more the merrier. Another person say, second. Another person says, seems like some version of conversations are ongoing and been said about FF on Xbox since early PS4 days. I am really curious about the reason of the holdup. I will tell you, it's because of Sony and Square. Okay, anyway, the original holdup, something to do about Microsoft not wanting crossplay. I seem to remember there may be an article on Eurogamer about that. And another person, Cold Waste, he said, I think it was that they didn't want the subscription-based online to bypass life goal requirement. You don't need PS Plus for Final Fantasy XIV. I guess the ongoing conversations are about what percentage of Microsoft will get from monthly subscription fees for Final Fantasy XIV. Didn't they drop the needle for live for MMO when they dropped the needle for live for, say, FP2 games? Then another person said, does Sony get that it does? If not, then I guess not. And another person said, probably. Hence they were talking about it again, but I assume Microsoft still wants a piece of that subscription money. Another person said, Waste, you were probably thinking of this one. Then another person, best 3D Final Fantasy game since X. And another person said, I am thousands of hours into this across 3 PlayStation now, but I will likely switch the moment they drop on Xbox version, not for a performance reason really, but mostly because I find the standby mode reliable and they're letting the games staying up to date. PlayStation don't seem to handle power cuts all well in my experience, and it would just have the initial startup and load in process much quicker. That I do prefer the Xbox controller to a DualSense for comfort. It said, I do understand why they put a possible Xbox version on hold while focusing on Endwalker though. Was there, and another person says, was the hold? I spent the lifetime time on PS4 version, but I'm dropping it like a bad habit when it gets to Xbox. All that necessary just seems designed to incite bickering. Another person says, I find it bloody annoying that the PS5 boot up right now where I left off. The night before, as I usually want to play a different game, I need to get in the habit of selecting power off from the menu instead of pressing the off button on the console, which put it in the rest mode. Maybe it's configuration, make off reset mode. What happened when the power cuts in rest mode? And then another person, he says here, it appears my preference haven't gone down well here for some reason. To be clear, there's something wrong with the PlayStation version. I quite literally played it for years, and I just find my Xbox a little better for multiplats. Need is all, but in the meantime, I will continue to play this game to death on my PS5 while I wait. And then another person said, your sin I think is apparently preferring to play on the Xbox than the PlayStation. I mean it, your POV, and it ain't wrong. While others might prefer it the other way around, and yet others think console's experience is well benefited the PC version. Wait a minute, it says here, each one of the points of view is very valid for the person. Can't comment as never played Final Fantasy 14 mainly because it's never available on Xbox. My preferred multi-platform mainstay as where my online friends are. Yet don't mean I couldn't do it on my PS or PC. And that's the end of that. Look, like I said before, when it comes to Final Fantasy 14, the game should have been on Xbox One already, because it started on PlayStation 3. But then when the Xbox One and PS4 came out, Squaresoft should have put the game both on PlayStation and on Xbox. And you know, when Final Fantasy Remake was in the making, and then when it got released, Final Fantasy Remake was supposed to come on Xbox. But then Sony and Square decided to put a time exclusive on the game, and then Xbox fans couldn't get it. So when it comes to Final Fantasy right now, as far as like Final Fantasy Online except Remake, you know, I could care. I'm like, you know what, whatever. If it comes, it comes. If it don't, it don't. It's not no big deal. You know, I just think Final Fantasy now is a big publicity stunt. And plus, what happened with the Avengers, with Crystal Dynamics, and then Sony and Square is like, you know, they're like buddy and all that, and they messed up the game. When it comes to Final Fantasy 14, the game should have been on Xbox already. Should have been on there, you know, because it came out on the PlayStation 3, and then Square should have put it on the Xbox One and PS4 and let it grow and let the game grow and take it from there. But ever since the whole Final Fantasy VII remake, to me, Squaresoft can't be trusted now, because they're coming up with all kind of excuses, using Endwalker as an excuse for using Endwalker as an excuse for the Xbox fans not getting Final Fantasy Online. So to me, the game is just a big publicity stunt right now. That's just my take on the whole thing. And the game should have been on Xbox One and PlayStation 4 together, you know. And let's not, you know what? I was gonna bring Nintendo into this, but that's for another video. Okay, but anyway, the game should have been out already, man. So all these excuses that they're coming up with, you know, talking about it's all about timing and all this, it should have been there, you know. And Yoshida, they would have benefited if Final Fantasy 14 was on Xbox One, and by the time Game Pass came out, they would have benefited already. You know what I'm saying? That user base would have jumped from 24 to about what? probably 48, somewhere around there. You know, because a lot of people play MMOs on Xbox, so you can just look at the Elder Scrolls user base, and that'll give you an estimation. So, to me, Final Fantasy 14 right now with Final Fantasy 7 Remake, this is just Sony's and Square's doing. Okay, so to me, the game now is just a big publicity stunt, you know, when it comes to video games. Final Fantasy 14, you know. So that's just my take. But anyway, let me know what y'all think. Nice talking to y'all people. Again, Chris, still a Star Wars and Star Trek thing for Dark Side. Gone. Peace.